This week's Parsha is Parshas Shmini, for, as far as Chitas is concerned, the third week in a row. According to the custom we have, the meaning that we have, that during the week we learn the Chumash, we learn the Sidra, the Torah portion that we are going to be reading the coming Shabbos. This coming Shabbos we will be reading Parshas Shmini, the Torah portion of Shmini. The last two Shabbosim were both on Yom Tov. Now, when Shabbos is on Yom Tov, the Yom Tov Torah reading takes precedence over the Shabbos Torah reading. So for the last 2 weeks, we didn't read a regular Torah portion in the order of the Torah portions that we go on the Shabbosim throughout the year. We read the Yom Tov portion. So for as far as learning the Chumash, the Torah portion of that coming Shabbos during the week is concerned, this is the third week in a row that we're learning it. And this Shabbos we will be finally reading it in Shul. So we've Parshas Shmini. The word Shmini means eighth. So that's the name of the Torah portion, and the Torah portion opens up discussing the eighth day. The eighth day of what? The eighth day of what's called Shmini L'Miluim. The eighth day of the setting up, inauguration, perhaps let's call it, of the Mishkan. So the Mishkan was this traveling temple. It's generally translated as tabernacle, which they had in the desert, which was built at the direction of Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem gave very clear instructions about how it should be built. They're enumerated in Psukim in the Torah. And this was built. Then there were what are called the 7 days, the Shivas Yemei Miluim, these 7 days of setting up the Mishkan, of practice. So during these 7 days, each day the Mishkan was set up in the morning, then it was taken down at the end of the day, and in between, during the course of the day, they would go about bringing the daily sacrifices as well as some special ones that were there as part of the inauguration process. So for these 7 days, the Mishkan was set up and taken down each day. Then on the 8th day, and this was, the setting up and taking down was an important part of the practice of the function and the operation of the Mishkan, because throughout the duration of the travels in the desert for the next almost 40 years, the way it worked was, and the Mishkan was effectively a temple. It was much smaller than one in Yerushalayim, but it was effectively designed to be able to be assembled and disassembled very easily. And that was because they were traveling. The Jewish people were effectively nomads. We were in the desert, and at basically zero notice, we would just pick up and travel. We had the clouds of glory that were leading the Jewish people, and when they picked up, we all just packed up and started moving until they would settle somewhere and stop, and then we would settle there and stay until they picked up again. And sometimes the amount of time that we stayed somewhere in between journeys was really, really long, and some years and years and years, and sometimes it was really short. But in any case, the Mishkan had to basically, in order to be able to effectively function as a temple for the Jewish people throughout the duration of the travels in the desert, it had to be able, obviously, to be assembled and disassembled. So the walls were made out of these columns. I wouldn't even call them panels. They were more, not quite two-dimensional, obviously, but kind of long and thin, more beams than panels, really. And these beams were then, they had sockets, they had foundations that they would stand in, and then there were poles that would be inserted to hold them all together. So it was designed to be relatively efficiently put together, taken apart as necessary. And because the putting together and taking apart was part of the operation of the Mishkan, obviously, so that was practiced throughout these 7 days of inauguration, just like the rest of the services were practiced. So on each of these 7 days, the Mishkan was assembled in the morning, then they would go through the service, and then it was disassembled. On the 8th day, Shmini L'Miluim, which is what the name of this week, what this week's Torah portion is named after, Shmini, the 8th, it was the 8th day, the Mishkan was set up and it stayed up. Because now it was the beginning of the actual, real, functional operation of the Mishkan, as opposed to the inauguration and the practice and the getting used to things, which was the first 7 days. Now, this 8th day was a really big deal. The Shekhinah, the glory of Hashem, Hashem's dwelling presence, came to be present in the Mishkan on this day. And just to I guess, to give a bit of insight and context into the magnitude of this day, although this isn't actually discussed in the text, but I think it'll reinforce what's discussed in the text. we have to understand why it's called the 8th day. Right? Because if we just said that there were 7 days of inauguration, and not only historically were there 7 days, they are actually called Shivas Yemei HaMiluim, the 7 days of inauguration, the 7 days of practice, the 7 days of setting up and getting used to things and inaugurating the Mishkan. And if the 8th day was then the first day of the proper function, why is it called the 8th day? It's not the 8th day. It's the first day of the next stage. Right? Sunday is not the 8th day of the previous week. There are 7 days in the week. Sunday is the first day of the following week. And here, it was kind of the same thing. There were 7 days of inauguration, and then the 8th day, or what we're calling the 8th day, actually wasn't the 8th day of anything, really. It was the first day of the actual function of the Mishkan, followed by day 2, day 3, day 4, etc. And they weren't really counted after that because it wasn't a predetermined period of time or a cycle that was going to go on for, 7 days or a week or a month or whatever it was. It was just day 1 of the regular operation. So why is it referred to as the 8th day? And the answer is something that's really quite deep and very powerful. What do we think of? What do you think of when you hear the number 7? Nature, okay. What specific examples of things that you think of when you hear the number 7?
Days of the week.
Days of the week, right? No brainer. Now, the 7 days of the week, the fact that the week is 7 days is not arbitrary. You think about it, why is it that every culture in the world follows a calendar based around a 7-day week? Not every calendar follows the same system of months. Or the same system of years. It's the Chinese year of that and this year of this. And years don't follow the same, and different calendars have even... Take, for example, the Jewish and then Gregorian, the primary secular calendar that's used in the developed world today. Bless you. We have the Jewish calendar, the length of the months oscillates between 29 and 30 days. And in the Gregorian calendar, it alternates between 30 and 31, generally, for the most part. So the length of months is different. In the Jewish calendar, the leap year has an additional month. There are 13 months, which doesn't exist in the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar has a 28-day month, February, in non-leap years. So there's a lot that's very different about these calendars. But for some reason, every single calendar follows a 7-day week. Now, there have been discrete periods of time throughout history when there were attempts to establish calendars that revolved around or that were based on non-7-day weeks. Actually, in the story of Esther and Mordechai, in the story of Purim, it says that Esther had a team of 7 ladies that worked for her, 7, I guess we could call them maidservants. And the reason she chose specifically to have a team of 7 was to help her keep track of Shabbos, because the calendar then, in that time, in that culture, was not a 7-day week. And she needed to keep track of Shabbos, and you could imagine it would be very easy, pretty quickly, to just get confused about which day is Shabbos if everyone around you is counting with a week that has a different number of days. So she had these 7 maidservants that would revolve, and when she knew every time she had the 6th one, it was Erev Shabbos, and every time she had the 7th one, it was Shabbos. But every single culture, every attempt to have a non-7-day week came to an end, and at the end of the day, everyone has come back to the 7-day week. And this could perhaps be explained from a number of different angles. I don't know whether, if you look at it, statistically, for some reason, it just works out that a 7-day week matches most effectively with the nature of human species. And that's why when we tried, whether it was longer or shorter, it just wouldn't work and it would come back to 7. That may be true. I don't know. But what I do know is that the number 7 is built into the fabric of the universe and built into the fabric of creation. Now, okay, I guess we can go into it a little bit. In short, we know that there is generally this concept of 10 spheros. These 10, there isn't really a good word to translate them that I'm aware of. But the 10 spheros that exist, every reality, every spiritual reality is comprised of these 10 elements, structural elements of a reality, perhaps we could call them. And we may be familiar with the terms. You have Chochmah, Bin, Hadasa, these 3 intellectual or academic elements, the first three elements within the structure of any reality are called Chochmah, Bina, and Das. And then there are the seven more emotional ones, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. Now, we could think of it in terms of us as people in our experience. If we were to divide the functions of our selves, of our souls, of our personalities into two categories, generally intellectual and emotional, the intellectual part of our selves, I guess we could call it, that intellectual academic part is primarily for ourselves. It's not to say that it's not relevant to the people around us and there are no ramifications. Obviously, that's not true. But our minds are primarily for ourselves and relevant to ourselves. We think. Thinking is an experience. When I think, none of you experience my thought. Hopefully, if I'm effective at communicating my thoughts, I can, get to the point where you have some sort of understanding and perception of my thoughts, but you're not experiencing my thoughts. You're experiencing the words that I'm communicating, which I'm using as tools to take the ideas that I'm thinking about and to present them to you using words. But my thoughts are not experienced by anyone else. My thoughts are for me. As opposed to emotions, emotions are really, for all intents and purposes, dispositions that we feel about things outside of ourselves. Like or dislike. I like something. I have a positive disposition towards it. I dislike something. I have a negative disposition towards it. I'm afraid of it. I'm drawn to it. It motivates me. Whatever it is, these are all things that are emotions by definition are primarily about interactions between ourselves and our environment. Whether it's objects in our environment, whether it's people in our environment, whatever it is, emotions are about us interacting with the people around us. So in terms of our behavior, now this is not to downplay the importance of the mind and of thought and understanding, because obviously, Chabad Chassidus is called Chabad for a reason, Chochmah Bina Das, because Chabad is the foundation, the mind is the foundation with which we can cause true, real transformation in emotions. The more we empower ourselves with knowledge, with information, with awareness, the more we're in a position to allow our emotions to shift following the things that we learn about and come to understand. But at the end of the day, in terms of our behavior, behaviorally, practically speaking, the part of us that is involved in our behaviors directly is our emotions much more than our minds. We do things because we feel inclined to do them. Now, the reason we feel inclined to do them may be because we understand that it's a good idea and that drives the inclination to do it. But at the end of the day, the last point of contact between ourselves and the thing we do, for all intents and purposes, is our inclination to do it or our inclination not to do it. And inclinations effectively are emotions. Emotions are inclinations. I wouldn't say they're synonymous, but they are certainly very closely related. So in terms of us actually doing things, interacting with the world around us, which at the end of the day is the most important, life's about interacting, about engaging, it's our emotions that are at the forefront of driving that, not our minds. And this is true. Now, our souls are also have these same 10 structural elements. Chochmah, Bina, Das, the three intellectual, let's call them, and then Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus, the seven primarily emotional. These reflect the same, and these in the soul, they're not spheres in the soul. And I've clarified this a number of times, but it's important to clarify repeatedly because it's a common confusion. It's not necessarily a huge deal. One might say that it's semantics. I would argue it's not semantics at all. I guess it's important to just have clarity in that. A soul doesn't have spheres. A soul has koiches. The nefesh habahamis, the animal soul, the Homo sapiens animal soul, that spiritual entity that makes our human bodies be living human beings, that soul has 10 what are called koiches. Let's call them perhaps abilities. These 10 elements, structural elements upon which its character and personality is built. And for each of us, they're different, but the the overall structure is the same. Each of us has Chachma Bina Das, then Chesed Gvurah Tiferes Netzach Yisod Malchus. It's just that the Chachma in each of our souls will vary. My Chachma is different to each of yours, etc. But we all have the same structure of 10. Now, in realities, in worlds, in Olamos, which is the word that's generally used in texts, which is loosely translated as worlds. I don't love the word worlds because technically it may be a good word, but I think it carries a lot of potential for misunderstanding. They're not planets, they're not parallel physical universes. They are non-physical realities that are equally real, but don't physically exist. Each of these worlds, each of these realities, each of these states of being is made of 10 spheros. Now, the 10 spheros have the same names as the 10 kochos, the 10 abilities, the 10 functions of our souls. And the reason is, it says very clearly, that our souls have 10 kochos. These are the words in Tanya, 10 abilities, which reflect the 10 spheros of these spiritual worlds, these spiritual realities, from which the soul is derived. And what that means is that the soul, each of us has a different soul, right? My soul is different to each of yours, and each of all the 10 elements in our souls are very different from each other's. But on the other hand, we say that the soul, the godly soul, particularly, is a chelek elokam mimah mamash. It's a part of God. Now, God is one, God is undefinable, God is indivisible. If our godly souls, each of us has a godly soul that's a part of God itself, and God is undefinable, indivisible, indescribable, how can each of us have a different soul if they're part of the same one indivisible and undefinable entity? And the answer is that piece of, let's call it, for lack of a better word, that piece or part of the Creator that He puts inside of us to give us the ability to engage in divine behavior and uplift the world, before it enters a relationship with our bodies and with our animal souls, it goes through a process of development. And this is a downward development because it starts off as a pure, unadulterated piece of God, and then it goes through a process that passes through these various realities and takes on the characteristics of realities one after the other, and it becomes, as it goes through this process of development, it becomes less and less in touch with and aware of who and what it truly is at its core. And it starts to take on a more and more limited view of reality and to have a limited awareness of the full truth. And as this happens, it becomes more and more defined, and it takes on specific characteristics. And the specific journey that each part of God that enters into a relationship with each of our bodies goes through is a little different. So because this journey, this process of development is unique for each soul, each one comes out differently, even though each one is identical starting out, because it's part of the same one undefinable and indivisible Creator. So because the soul goes through this process of development, passing through each of these states of reality, each of which is made up of a very different but equivalent structure of 10, the 10 spheros. So when the soul comes out at the end of that process, the character that it has developed as a result of this process of development has 10 elements as well, which go by the same names as the 10 spheros because they reflect them, because that's where they came from. The reason the soul ends up with these 10 koichos, these 10 abilities, these 10 functions, is because it passed through a process of development, passing through these realities, each of which is built upon this equivalent structure of 10 spheros. So the names of the koichos reflect the names of the koichos, the abilities in our souls, reflect, as well as the general structure, reflect the structure and the names of the spheros, because that's where it comes from. That's where the structure comes from. Now, coming back to why this is relevant to this discussion, there are 10 spheros, there are 10 koichos. 3 are primarily academic and or intellectual, let's say, rather than academic. 7 are primarily emotional. And as we said earlier, emotions are the part of us that are primarily relevant and most directly responsible for our actual interaction and engagement with our surroundings. And the same is true spiritually. The same is true of the Creator. The part of the Creator, so to speak, in terms of these characteristics that the Creator takes on in order to be able to function and create a limited world, the Creator takes on limited characteristics that don't define the Creator, but that Creator operates through them. And we've discussed this at length when discussing various names of God, etc., and the concept of names. So the characteristics that the Creator takes on and through which the Creator operates have the same structure of 10, divided into these categories of primarily intellectual, which are the first 3 Chochmah Bina Das, and then the emotional 7, which are primarily associated with actual action, interaction with things outside of the Creator itself. And so the world is created, and this isn't just the physical universe as well as every spiritual reality and every entity that exists, every concept that exists, time, space, everything other than the Creator itself exists because the Creator makes it exist, and the tools, the primary tools that the Creator uses to interact, to engage, to make things exist are the 7 emotional elements, the Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisod, and Malchus. When the Creator created time, time is a creation. Time didn't always exist, as hard as that is to understand and to comprehend. And this is something we've discussed before, but maybe we should talk about it for a couple minutes. There are certainly a few people in class who I think haven't been here when I've discussed it in the past. And I'm going to talk about space rather than time because it's just a little easier to illustrate and we have texts to really attack this clearly. But time and space are very, very much equivalent in this regard. One of the names that's used to describe the Creator or to refer to the Creator is Makom. The translation of the word Makom is space or place. If you look in an English Siddur, for example, an English translated prayer book, when you see the name Makom, generally it will be translated as omnipresent, which means present everywhere. God is present everywhere. Whilst that is a true fact that God is everywhere, God is omnipresent, that's really not what the name Makom means, technically at all. It's an outcome of what the name means. And there's a medrash that very clearly addresses this, and the medrash says, Lama nikra shmoi Makom. Why is the Creator referred to as Makom, as place, as space? Mipnei shehu makomo shel olam ve'ein ha'olam makomo. Ein ha'olam makomo. The universe, space, is not the location in which the Creator exists. Hu, the Creator, Makomo Shel Olam, is the location inside of which space exists. The Creator was there before space. The Creator decided voluntarily to make space exist. So the Creator was there before space existed. Space exists in the Creator. The Creator was there. The Creator was the original location that existed before anything existed. Then the Creator decided voluntarily to make space exist. So now space exists in the Creator. Hu Makomo Shel Olam. He is the location in which space exists. Space isn't the location in which the Creator exists. So is the Creator omnipresent? Obviously. There's no point in space in which the Creator is absent, because every point in space is made to exist actively, intentionally by the Creator at every moment in time. So the Creator can't be absent in any point in space or it wouldn't exist. So is the Creator present in every point in space? Yes, but that's not what the name Makom means. Makom doesn't mean omnipresent, present everywhere. Makom means all of space exists in Him, as a result of which it just so happens that He is omnipresent. So omnipresent isn't really a good translation of what Makom means. Omnipresent is an outcome of the fact that He is Makom. He is present everywhere because of the fact that every point in space exists inside of Him. Now, and I point this out every time at the end, just a disclaimer, I'm not suggesting that they should replace the use of the word omnipresent with something else, because the only way to do that better would be to put a full paragraph in the Siddur every time it says omnipresent. I don't think anyone would suggest that that's a good idea. So, for all intents and purposes, it may be that that's the best word that we have. But it's important to just be aware of the fact that that's not what it actually means. And the same thing that's true of space is true of time. There is no point in time in which the Creator doesn't exist. Not because the Creator is, the Creator's everywhere. And we could say, perhaps, let's create a word for the sake of this discussion. The Creator is everywhere and every when. The Creator is every when. The Creator is present in every point in time, not because He is present in every point in time, but because every point in time exists in the Creator. The Creator voluntarily made time exist. So obviously there's no point in time in which the Creator is absent. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, the days of the week, time itself, every instant in time is a creation. All the instants inside of the first 24 hours of the week, Yom Rishon, the first day, Sunday, let's call it, were created primarily through this attribute, this midah, this sphera of chesed. Did I say Monday or Sunday? Sunday, okay, good. Yom Sheni, the second day of the week, which is Monday, was created by the Creator using the sphera of Gvura as a channel, as a tool through which the day was created, through which each moment in time within the category of Monday was created. All of them were created primarily through the midah of Gvura. It's just interesting that we see on the day Gvura, generally during the account of creation, it says, and God saw what He had created, and He saw ki tov, that it was good. On Monday, it doesn't say ki tov, that He saw that it was good. Monday is the day that was created through the midah of Gvura. Gvura is strength, stringency, demandingness. And because this is an attribute... Sorry? What's that?
Is it Mondays?
Oh, yeah, right? Depends for who. But yeah. So because the day Monday, now Gvura is not bad. Gvura is not meanness. God's not mean. But sometimes things that the Creator does come across as mean. It's difficult to understand. Why? Because it's being done in a way of strength, in a way of demanding from us, a way of drawing out the best in us by giving us challenges and difficulties. Now, obviously, at the end of the day, if we believe that the Creator is the ultimate good, all of those things are good. We're not saying that the Creator is being mean or cruel, but it may feel like that because we're not in touch with the goodness behind that strength. Right? There are many things that a loving parent who wants to give their children the best chance at having the best quality of life will do to a child that a child will not appreciate at the time. Enforcing boundaries. Teaching the importance of respecting boundaries, I guess, would be perhaps the primary function of discipline. Right? Discipline, the point of discipline is not to punish. Punishments, whatever, I'm not even going to go there. But effective, if you want to raise a child so that that child should have the best chance at life, the best chance at having a good quality of life in the long run, not just enjoyment in the moment. The fact is, life is going to throw challenges and difficult situations and knock down everybody at some point in time. And for each of us, this experience is very different. And that's not to say that it's okay to do things that are bad to someone else, because that's just the cost of living, because it's never okay to do something wrong to someone else. But at the end of the day, the reality is each of us going through life is going to face real challenges, real difficulties. Life is going to throw us right and left hooks again and again. It's just the way it goes. Now, if we want to prepare our children to have the best experience as they encounter those things, we want to make sure that they understand that actions have outcomes. The choices we make have consequences. And life's not always just going to feel good in the moment. But when we respect our responsibilities and take our responsibilities seriously, we end up having a better quality of life. The more we teach children that, the better quality of life they're going to have. It's a fact. So whilst it doesn't feel fun for the child in the moment to be educated on the importance of taking responsibilities seriously and respecting boundaries and the importance of boundaries, etc., it's definitely a kindness to teach that to a child. That has to come with a measure of strength. It doesn't have to be mean or cruel, ever. There's no need to ever be mean or cruel to a child. There's technically no need to ever scream at a child or hit a child or raise your voice at a child if you really have your technique down pat. But there is a place to teach the importance of respecting boundaries. A very, very, very important place. It's probably, I would argue, perhaps one of the most important roles of a parent. In addition, obviously, to keeping a child safe, etc., etc., etc. So when you teach a child the importance of responsibility and the realness of the relationship between the decisions they make and the outcomes and the consequences that they're going to face, and the fact that life's not always fun, but if you stand up to it and accept your responsibility, you will end up better off, the child will have a better quality of life, no doubt about it. This is through a Jewish and Torah perspective, and it's very well documented in the science of it and the statistics. It's just the way it goes. Now, when you are teaching a child about the importance of boundaries and responsibility, it doesn't feel good. You have to call on that strong side of yourself to do that effectively. It's gvura, it's strength. It's not mean. It's not cruel. It's perhaps one of the kindest and most valuable things you could ever, one of the most important and valuable contributions you can make to your child's life, to any child's life, whether you're the parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you're just another person who's interacting with someone and you have the opportunity to teach them the importance of these things in a way that's effective and constructive. It's one of the most valuable things you can give a person. It's not fun for them. It's strong, it's gvura, but it's kind, it's good. So gvura is strength. The midah of gvura, the second in this series of 7 emotional attributes, is gvura, strength, being demanding. It's good, it's not mean or cruel, but it is strong and it's demanding. Now, because this is Monday is a day that was created through God's attribute of strength and demandingness, let's call it. I don't know if that's a real word, but it works. It doesn't always look good and it doesn't always feel good as much as it truly is good. So it doesn't say ki tov and he saw that it was good on that day because it doesn't always look good. Things that come from Gvura don't necessarily always seem good. And this just demonstrates the realness of the relationship between these days and the spiritual elements through which they were created. Chesed. Sunday was created through chesed, through kindness, through givingness. And it says, and he saw that it was good. On the second day, it doesn't say that he saw that it was good because it was created through Gvura. So each of the days of the week was created through one of these attributes. There are 7 attributes. There are 7 days of the week. The reason that there's a 7-day week and always has been a 7-day week and always will be a 7-day week, that's not to say, like I said, that there always was a 7-day week in every place, in every moment in time, because there were attempts to move away from it, but they've all come back to it. Every calendar revolves around a 7-day week because this is a real thing. Sunday and the days of the week are perfectly in line in the secular calendar with the Jewish calendar, with Sunday is on Yom Rishon. Shabbos and Saturday aren't the same thing. Thank God they work out on the same day, but it didn't have to be, hypothetically at least. The same way there could have been an 8-day week, Sunday could have been on Yom Shlishi, on the 3rd day of the Jewish calendar, and Shabbos could have been on Thursday, which would have been really complicated. It's not, thank God. Right, so there's a 7-day week because the time is a creation, and every moment in the day of Sunday was created through the midah of chesed. And there are certain energies that are common within every Sunday. There are certain things. Now, each Sunday is different and each moment in time is different. They're independent entities, obviously. Otherwise, life wouldn't really have all that much meaning. But there are certain things that are common, certain underlying themes that are common to every moment within any given Sunday and every moment within every Sunday collectively, because Sundays come from the sphera of chesed, the midah of chesed. Mondays come from gvura. Tuesdays come from tiferes. Tiferes, the translation of the word Tiferes, which is the third emotional attribute, is beauty. Tiferes is a combination of chesed and gvura, of kindness and strength, which is often referred to as mercy. It's not unconditional giving. It's recognizing the importance of boundaries, but it's not being, and again, coming back to the analogy of educating children, whether it's as a parent or as a teacher, it's very important to understand and to be able to really act on the importance of boundaries and teaching a child the relationship between decisions that they make and the outcomes and the consequences of those decisions. It's important to have that strength. But the fact is we're human, and there's also a time and place, and that has to be balanced with, in a healthy relationship, and this is true of a relationship between friends, between spouses, siblings, parents and children, teachers and students. There have to be expressions of unconditional love. You don't just tell children you love them when you're proud of the way they behaved. You have to sometimes just call a child over and give them a hug and say, I love you. Just because. Not because they earned it, not because they deserve it, just out of the blue. Very important to have that chesed, that unconditional love. A child knows that they are loved unconditionally. It's also important for there to be moments where strength is implemented and there is a no-nonsense, nothing to talk about, enforcement of boundaries for the child's own sake. This is chesed and this is gvura. But then there's also a time and place when really a boundary needs to be enforced, but at the same time perhaps to take into consideration other factors and to say, you know what? Maybe it's now, even though this is an opportunity to teach responsibility, and technically speaking I probably should, maybe now's not exactly the right time. And to be able to do this role effectively, whether as a parent, as a teacher, as a spouse, as a friend, as a child or a student, whatever it is, we have to recognize the absolutes, but sometimes we also have to be able to take both into consideration and bring the two together and say, yes, this is important. Now I'm going to do what we might look as mercy. Now, mercy is we think of perhaps as being kind to someone that needs kindness. It's not necessarily just being kind to someone that needs kindness. It's bringing kindness into a scenario where it may not technically even necessarily be, strictly speaking, at first glance, the right approach. This is Tiferes. It's bringing the two together. It's balancing gvura and strength with chesed and unconditional giving and bringing the two together in some sort of balance. And this is beauty. Beauty comes oftentimes from creating contrast, from bringing opposites together. It also shows a depth of connection, a depth of sophistication. It's very easy relatively easy to operate in extremes. Right? Regardless of the extreme, if someone ever gives you a job and says, do this and take it to the extreme and don't stop and don't think twice and don't look back, just go. As hard as the actual job may be, if you don't have to think and you don't have to balance and work things out, there's only so hard that it can be. The biggest challenges in life really are the things where we have to figure out the balance. Taking things into consideration, taking opposite motivations into consideration, balancing them together. That calls out the deepest parts of the soul. That brings out the true beauty in the soul. Oftentimes the beauty, and whether this is something someone wants to relate to in terms of fashion, in terms of interior design, in terms of other creative arts, oftentimes bringing things that contrast with each other together is a very effective tool for creating things that we would describe as beauty. So this is why this midah is called Tiferes. It's beauty, true beauty, and really drawing on the depths of our soul and connecting with our purpose, connecting with who we are, and the utmost of our abilities is demonstrated when we can take both of these, to an extent, opposite extremes of unconditional love and strength, bring them together and behave in a way that's taking both into consideration and balancing them. This is what Tiferes is, and this is a greater level perhaps of beauty, and of the beauty within a person's soul, a big part of which is, the ability to balance opposites and this sophistication. That's illustrated here in this third characteristic, which is responsible for creating the day Tuesday. If you look in the account of creation, on the day Tuesday it says Kitov twice. God saw that it was good twice as many times as any other day of the week. Because when we find that balance of taking these opposites and bringing them together and find the balance of unconditional love with the need for being strong and bring them two together, that's the real ultimate achievement in terms of a relationship. That's why it says Kitov twice.
You said it's very easy for Tiferes to operate in extremes?
Not Tiferes.
Oh.
For a person to operate in extremes, relatively speaking. Whether it's just be strict all the way, okay, I don't have to stop and think, I don't have to take anything into account, just go really hardcore strict. If I say just be giving, okay, so you just be giving. If I tell you I am charging you with the responsibility of assessing the need for unconditional giving, unconditional love, together and balancing that out with the need for strictness and being demanding and teaching responsibility, and you are responsible for finding the balance between them and finding that right balance in each situation, that's an infinitely harder job, right? You don't need to find such an exceptional person to enact chesed, to just be this person who's giving, who's being kind, who's doing these things, if all you want them to do is do that in the extreme. You don't have to find such an exceptional person if you're charging them with operating in a mode of gvura to the extreme. If you want to find someone who's going to be responsible for, on your behalf, finding the balance between the two, you want to find a really exceptional person. That's a much harder thing to do. And it calls on much deeper parts of the soul. And that's the ultimate beauty in terms of a relationship between people. Make sense? So the relationship between days of the week, and we see it in the way the things that are said in the Torah, in the biblical account of creation about the days of the week, very strongly reflect the spiritual spheres, the spiritual entities through which they were created, because the connection is real. There are 7 spheres. Each of the days of the week was created using one of those 7 spheres. So Friday, Fridays all have something in common. There is no 8th day of the week. And there never will be. There may be attempts to create one, but they will not last as they have not lasted in the past. Because there is no 8th day. The 8th day of the week is Sunday. There are only 7 attributes. And the days of the week, every moment in time was created through those attributes. And the number infinite, I guess we could say, to an extent, number of moments in time that fall within any given Sunday were created through Chesed, and the moments in time on Monday were created through Gvura. And after the moments in time created through Malchut, which is the 7th one that was responsible for creating Shabbos, when those are done, the cycle starts again, because there's no 8th sphere, there's no 8th emotional attribute that created an 8th day. There is no 8th day. We have a new cycle of 7 days. So the reason there are 7 days in the week is very real. The number 7 is built into the fabric of creation. 7 is the completeness of the natural order, the completeness of the universe. The order of nature, time, space, and all the various rules and things that are built into the universe which exists inside of time and space. All of them have a relationship with this cycle of 7, because that's where they come from. They're created by the Creator using these 7 emotional attributes. Remember that our emotions, as opposed to, as people even, our emotions, as opposed to our intellectual abilities, are the things that are primarily associated with our interactions with our surroundings. It's our emotions. God has another 3 attributes, Chachma, Bin, and Das, these intellectual-like ones, intellectual-like attributes, but those are not the ones that are primarily associated with interacting, with creating. That's the 7 emotional ones, and therefore there are 7 days of the week. So the natural order is represented by the number 7 for a very real reason. The number 7 is very real within nature. And there has to be a 7-day week by definition. So what does 8 represent? Nature and the natural order is not the sum total of everything that exists. It's the sum total of the natural order. The physical universe was created inside of time and space. Time is created on this cycle of 7, and space also is created, it has these elements of 7. It's built through the same system. There has to be these elements of 7 built into it. And there are these seven emotional elements in our Homo sapiens animal souls. There are these 7 elements within our divine souls. There are 7 elements in everything. It's the completeness of nature, the 7-day week. Now within 7 there are 2 categories, and you see this in Midas. The Midas, the 7 attributes, are generally divided into 2 categories, the first 6 versus the 7th. The 6 days of the week and Shabbos. The 6 days of creation versus Shabbos, the day of rest, the day on which all of that gets elevated and uplifted. So Shabbos is different to the 6 days of the week. But it's still part of the natural order. Shabbos is one of the days of the week. It exists within nature. There is no 8th day. 8 represents that which is beyond the natural order, that which is transcendent. That which exists, but doesn't operate based on the structure of the natural order. It's not determined by time. It's not determined by space. It's not determined by the rules of thermodynamics. It's not determined by any of the rules of nature, because doesn't exist inside of nature. It transcends nature. It's equally real, but it's very, very different. And there's no 9 because everything outside of nature is non-natural. It's a single category that encompasses everything that's transcendent. Because if it's transcendent, we have no direct relationship with it, and therefore there are no parts because our relationship with it is very distant. It's what we call makif. It's a non-immanent, it's a transcendent relationship. And if something's transcendent by definition, there are not going to be specific details in that relationship. So there's just one category of 8. 8 represents that which is beyond nature. Because 7 is the completeness of the natural order created through these 7 divine functionalities of chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, hod, yesod, malchus, which are reflected in the 7 abilities of our souls, both Homo sapiens, animal souls, and divine souls. Now, bringing all of that back to the Parsha, why is it called the 8th day? It's not really the 8th day. It's the first day of the regular function of the Mishkan. There were only 7 days of inauguration. There were 7 days inauguration, and then there was the beginning of the regular operation. Why is the first day of regular operation called the 8th day? It's not the 8th day of anything. It's the first day of phase 2 after the end of the 7 days. And the answer is, let's look at what happened. On the 8th day, the divine presence, God's divine presence, came to be present in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, and expressed there in a way that wasn't seen earlier, with this cloud that came to rest there. Something happened on the 8th day that hadn't happened on the first 7 days. As a matter of fact, it says that on the 8th day, when Moshe set up the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the beams stood up by themselves. He set it up himself. There's no way, considering the size and mass of these components that the Mishkan was built out of, there's no way that any human being in history could possibly have lifted any one of those beams on his own, and Moshe lifted them all himself. Why? There was this miracle where the beams kind of stood up. As he raised them, they just stood themselves up. Now, they didn't stand up on their own. He had to lift them, but as he lifted them, they stood themselves up so that he was able to raise them, even though there was no physical possibility of him being able to do that. That didn't happen on the first 7 days. On the first 7 days, it was presumably set up by teams of people. Because on the first 7 days, there wasn't this transcendent divine presence that came to be present in the Mishkan in a way that's unnatural, because it's something that's transcendent shouldn't be able to be apparent. We shouldn't be able to see it, because that's the opposite of transcendence. It happened on the 8th day. Why? Because 8 is that which is transcendent. The only way to access and tap into that which is transcendent is to achieve a completeness of that which is natural, to go through the natural order, to do the utmost and complete our responsibilities within the confines of nature. And that allows the transcendent to then become accessible as a result. So although that which is transcendent is not the 8th in a series, it's something completely separate, but the only way to get there is to complete the series of 7. So that 8th day is called the 8th day, even though it's not technically the 8th day, it's the first day of something completely separate. Because what happened then was us having and experiencing that which is transcendent, which is generally by definition not experienceable, because experiencing something consciously is the opposite of transcendence. We were able to experience it because we completed that which was part of the order of seven, the order of nature, and it taught us that when we complete our utmost ability and fulfill our utmost abilities within the confines of nature, we will reach and get in touch with and experience that which is transcendent, which is impossible. The only way to get there is by completing that which is part of the natural order. And that's why it's called the eighth, even though it's not really the eighth. Because the only way to get there, it is something that is only accessible after the completion of seven. That's why it's called eighth. It's really seven and then a separate category, but because the separate category is only accessible after completing seven, it's referred to as eighth. Now, we have to figure out how to, as usual, complete the next 95% of the first half of the text within the next 6 minutes. Super duper quickly, another thing that's discussed in this parsha is the passing of Nadav and Avihu, 2 sons of Aaron HaKohen. The reason they passed away was because they brought an unsolicited incense sacrifice. They were really into this whole thing. It was amazing. God's presence came into the Mishkan. They were super excited. Their life was all about divinity. They never got married and set up families because they didn't want to be tied down to material responsibilities of looking after those people. They just wanted to be completely engulfed in divinity and just experience divinity. So when this happened, they were like, wow, awesome. Incense is like the highest level of sacrifice. Let's go offer up incense. They weren't told to do it. They died as a result. Now, this death was not, it wasn't a simple thing. These were people who were so spiritually oriented and so focused on divinity and becoming one with the Creator that they pursued the Creator to the extent that they actually got their wish, and their souls, which wanted to become one with the Creator, did so to the extent that they experienced a level of transcendence that didn't allow them to be in their bodies anymore, which is why the bodies ceased to be alive, i.e. they died. Their souls left their bodies. It was kind of what they wanted. So it was something that was relatively noble in a certain context. Was it the right thing? No. It's not the right thing to pursue death. It's not the right thing to shun responsibilities in the pursuit of personal transcendence. Pursuit of transcendence is noble within a certain context. And this is where we get to the third, really, subject that's discussed in the Parsha. And this is towards the end of the Parsha. We have the rules of eating kosher and non-kosher and very detailed descriptions of, insects and things that a lot of us might consider pretty gross, and very technical descriptions of the rules of kosher and non-kosher, what we can eat and what we can't eat, based on very material, mundane things. And how are these things all squashed together in one parsha? We're talking about the eighth day, the achievement of transcendence that's beyond nature. We're talking about this story of these people who died, and although it says that they were burnt, they were consumed by the fire of God, but their bodies were not damaged at all. Their bodies were entirely intact because this fire went and consumed, so to speak, their souls. Their souls became enveloped within this divine fire and left their bodies, and they died. They were burnt to death by fire, but their bodies were untouched because it wasn't a physical fire that killed them by burning their bodies. It was a spiritual fire. A divine fire, at least, let's say. I'm not so sure that I'd go so far as to say that it was a non-physical fire, but a divine fire that their souls became engulfed by. So we're talking about pretty lofty, mundane, ethereal stuff. And then we have this really, really material and mundane stuff at the end of the parsha. One second. Okay. Yeah. So, despite the fact that, these are not random things that are squashed together, there is a very important lesson that's being taught by the combination of these themes. And the lesson is, pursuit of transcendence is important. Pursuit of transcendence and being spiritually oriented as opposed to materially oriented is a very important part of Torah life. trying to not just follow the rules, but to really understand what they're about and to become one with the Torah and become one with the Creator that's presented itself to us through Torah. It's about transcendence. It's very important, but it's super duper important not to get carried away. Because the pursuit of transcendence can lead to some incredibly satisfying experiences, which obviously can potentially lead a person very far astray very quickly, because it feels amazing. Right? And there are people who do all kinds of things that are extremely damaging to their bodies, sometimes permanently damaging to their bodies and their minds in the pursuit of this, at least, feeling of transcendence, even if it's not real transcendence, it's just a distorted perspective. So, the pursuit of transcendence isn't necessarily a good thing per se, and the Torah is teaching us transcendence, true transcendence, reaching that which is beyond the order of nature, becoming one with transcendent divinity, which can happen as a result of maxing out our responsibilities within the order of nature and then allowing ourselves to be able to, as a result, experience transcendent divinity, is a very, very positive and noble pursuit. But for it to stay positive and noble, it has to be balanced, it has to be restrained and tweaked by a commitment to following directions. Right? Giving someone a gift is, generally speaking, a very positive thing to do. It's a good idea. Giving gifts to someone that you like, if you want to fortify your relationship with someone or reinforce someone's sense of being appreciated by you, gifts can be a very effective way of doing that. But giving a gift doesn't mean giving them what you want to give them. That's not good advice. Good advice is give them what they want. Even if it seems mundane, it seems worthless, it seems pointless. If it's what they want, that's going to be the most effective thing, because this is what's closest to their heart. And if a gift is about them, about reinforcing their sense of being appreciated, they're going to feel appreciated if they get something that shows that you are taking into account what they want. If you go and spend an extravagant amount of money on an extravagant gift that you should really know better than thinking this person's going to be interested in, it's kind of nice on one hand, but what it says isn't so great. It says that even when you buy this person a gift, what you're thinking about is yourself, not about them. The message isn't great. If the pursuit of transcendence is the pursuit of my experience of transcendence, my transcendent experience, that's not noble. If my pursuit of transcendence is pursuit of oneness with the Creator in a way that is aligned with my purpose and with what the Creator wants from me, that's the ultimate. So the Torah follows up with these discussions of Shmini, which is transcendence, the story of Nadav and Avihu, whose souls departed their bodies in the pursuit of transcendence, by saying, keep in mind that we have a discussion of transcendence, which is a good thing to pursue. We then have a negative instance of the pursuit of transcendence in the story of Nadav and Avihu. And then we have very mundane laws, which remind us, if you want to achieve true transcendence, one with not just non-materialism and spirituality, but godliness, you want to become one with God, you've got to do it God's way. You've got to follow rules that can appear and seem very mundane, and they may be mundane on a certain level, but if these are the things that the Creator has instructed us to do, these are the directives He has given us, then if we want to become one with the Creator, if we want to reinforce our relationship with the Creator, we want to pursue transcendence in the form of becoming one with the ultimate transcendent entity, which is the Creator itself, the way to do that is by following the guidelines the Creator has given us. If you want to fortify your relationship with someone and your oneness with them, give them a gift in a way that it's the gift that they want. Show that you've been listening, you've been paying attention, you've been perceptive, you've picked up on the things that are meaningful to them, and you're giving them the gift that they want, regardless of whether or not you find it valuable yourself at all. That's going to make a person feel really, really appreciated. And in extent, if you buy someone something that they know that you find worthless, And it shows that you are putting their interests first, and they know it's worthless, and that shows to them that although you find this thing worthless, you bought it for them as a gift because you know that they find it meaningful. That in some ways is the ultimate expression of consideration and caring and respect and valuing a person. That says even more than buying something that they value that you also value. Now, I'm not saying every time you buy a gift, you have to make yourself crazy to buy something that only they find valuable and you don't. I'm not saying that's practical advice, but at least conceptually, an instance of giving someone a gift that they value that you don't is the ultimate expression of respecting and valuing them. And so the Torah is telling us, in your pursuit of transcendence, don't lose touch of the mundane, of the halachas, of the actual seemingly mundane guidelines the Torah gives us. Do eat this, don't eat that. Depending on whether it has fins and scales and split hooves and chews its cud. These are really mundane things, but these are the things that are important to the Creator. How do we know? Because the Creator told us. You want to know what gift to buy someone? Listen to them. Pay attention. Most of the time, if you pay attention to someone, not just paying attention to what they give you, but paying attention to them and their experience. Is there a teacher waiting outside?
No.
No? If someone comes, please let me know. If you're paying attention to what a person wants and what's important to them and what makes them feel good, with time you should be able to pick up on those things. And you know what? If you don't pick up on them, you can ask. That's also not a bad thing to do. And then when you buy that person that gift that shows that you've been listening, you've been paying attention to what they like and what they want, that's going to show them. It's not just going to create an illusion. It's going to show them that you've been paying attention not just to what they provide you and the feelings they give you, but to what they want and what's important to them. And that's one of the most powerful things you can ever do to fortify your relationship with someone, is to show them that their interests are important to you and you've been listening and you know what's important to them. And that's the gift you choose to give them. The Torah comes at the end and says, in your pursuit of transcendence, remember, if you want the ultimate transcendence, one with the Creator, listen to what the Creator wants. Transcend nature by following the guidelines that ultimately transcendent entity has given you clearly in the Torah. It may seem mundane, but when you do something that seems mundane to you because it's what the Creator has asked us to do, has instructed us to do, choose your food based on fins and scales, split hooves, etc., based on whether the plant has already, is more than 4 years old, etc. That shows that your pursuit of transcendence is not just pursuing an experience of transcendence, but pursuing oneness with the Creator. That's how you can achieve the ultimate transcendence. And that's the message of combining these three subjects into one parsha. Have a good week, everyone.